I want to start today with a premise that might sound, well, entirely backwards, especially if you spend literally any time at all on the internet.
Oh, definitely.
Right, because the businesses that are quietly making the most money, the ones generating the highest quality leads and just dominating their niches on social media, they are usually the ones whose internal marketing systems are incredibly, almost painfully boring.
It's the ultimate paradox of digital marketing, really.
Yeah.
Because on the front end, the audience sees engagement, they see value, and this perfect, effortless rhythm.
Yeah, it looks like magic.
Exactly. But on the back end, it's just a spreadsheet. It's a template
Mm.
and a very, very boring set of operational rules.
Right. But let's contrast that with the reality that most of us actually live in, because I want you to picture this. It is Thursday afternoon.
The worst time.
Ugh, the absolute worst. You are sitting at your desk staring at a blank screen, and the cursor is just blinking at you, mocking you, basically.
We have all been there.
You know, deep down in your bones that you need to post something for your business today because you haven't posted since last Tuesday. So the guilt is really starting to creep in, but your brain is completely drained.
Yeah, you've got client emails piling up.
Exactly. A vendor just called with a delay. And the absolute last thing you have the cognitive energy for right now is trying to be, clever or viral on the internet.
So what do? You close the tab?
Yep. You tell yourself, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it when I'm feeling more inspired.
And we all know exactly how that story ends.
Yeah.
Tomorrow becomes next week becomes next month. I mean, it is the universal cycle of digital marketing despair for almost anyone trying to run a business while simultaneously trying to grow it.
Because you're relying on a feeling.
Right. You're relying on inspiration to do the job of an engine,
Mm.
and that just doesn't work.
And that scenario right there, that incredibly frustrating, exhausting feeling of constantly falling behind that is exactly what we are going to dismantle today. So welcome to today's deep dive.
It's a big one today.
It really is. If you are an entrepreneur, a marketer, a creator, or just someone who is endlessly fascinated by how digital systems actually operate under the hood, you are in the exact right place. Our mission today is to completely reframe how you approach social media marketing.
We are taking the pressure off.
Completely. We are throwing away the need for daily inspiration, and we are going to replace it with mechanics.
And to do that, we are pulling our insights today exclusively from this really extensive masterclass of an article. It was published on the Whoop Social blog.
Yeah, it's titled Social Media Consistency, Build a System, Not a Streak.
Right. Written by Frank Heidenreich, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Whoop Social. And what really makes this piece worth our time, why we're doing a whole deep dive on it, is that it isn't based on theoretical fluff.
Right. It's not just some guy's opinion.
No, it's grounded in a massive data set. The author is pulling from over 14 years of hands-on experience. He's actually scaled organic social strategies for more than 230 companies.
Wow. Across 14 different countries, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But more importantly, the frameworks we're going to discuss are backed by real cross-industry benchmarks. We are talking about a data set of 5 million posts
That's huge.
and a separate 70 million post benchmark library across platforms like Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the foundational thesis of his entire piece, it completely stops you in your tracks. He argues that small businesses do not fail on social media because they lack ideas.
There's a total myth.
Right. They fail because they rely on motivation. And as he puts it, motivation is a terrible operating system. Consistency has to be a system, not just a streak of good days.
It is a really profound operational shift. Because, when people hear the word consistency, they usually just assume it means forcing yourself to post a lot.
Grinding it out.
Exactly. But the source text defines consistency much more rigorously than that. It requires 3 distinct non-negotiable elements.
What are they?
First, a sustainable frequency. Second, standardized templates. And third, a long enough lead time, a buffer, basically to survive your actual business getting busy.
I want to pause on the data for a second, though, because I'm always a little skeptical when people say, just post more and you'll win. Does the data actually prove that showing up consistently moves the needle, even if the posts aren't like cinematic masterpieces?
It absolutely does. The article highlights studies from Buffer showing that consistent posting can yield up to 5 times more engagement.
5 times, just from being consistent.
Compared to brands that post sporadically, yeah.
Yeah.
But we have to understand why that happens mechanically. It's not just that the algorithm rewards you for logging in and being a good user. It's about statistical probability. It's about at-bats.
Meaning, You just need more swings at the ball to figure out what the pitcher is throwing.
That's a great way to put it. The algorithms on these platforms are essentially giant continuous testing machines. So every time you post, you are feeding the machine a new data point.
Right.
If you post once a month, it takes the algorithm and you, honestly, an entire year to gather 12 data points about what your audience actually cares about.
That is way too slow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you post systematically, you gather those 12 data points in a week. You accelerate the learning curve. You give a system enough repetitions to build an accurate map of your audience's preferences.
Which brings us to the first massive hurdle. Because before we can start sketching out the blueprints for this perfectly oiled, highly efficient content machine, we have to look under the hood of your current process.
You have to diagnose the drop-off.
Exactly. We have to figure out why the old system keeps stalling out.
And this brings us to the bottleneck theory of social media, the default advice in the marketing industry, whenever someone complains about being inconsistent, is incredibly unhelpful.
Oh, I know.
It's almost always some variation of just work harder.
I absolutely hate that. The whole hustle culture band-aid. Just wake up at 4 a.m., you know? Just grind it out. It reminds me of having a leaky pipe in your house.
Right.
If your plumbing is leaking behind the drywall, you don't fix it by going down to the basement and turning up the water pressure at the main valve.
No, you destroy your house.
Exactly. If you just push more water, more effort, more discipline through a structurally broken system, you don't get a working sink. You just create a bigger, more stressful flood in your living room.
That is the exact dynamic at play here. You are diagnosing a structural failure, but treating it like a moral failure, like you just aren't disciplined enough.
Yes.
The source text breaks down these structural failures into specific symptoms that typically plague small businesses.
Yeah.
So it requires a bit of self-diagnosis to figure out where your specific pipe is leaking.
Let's walk through these, and I encourage everyone listening right now to mentally audit themselves here, because I'll be honest, I've fallen into almost every single one of these traps at some point.
We all have.
So the first symptom the author identifies is the classic lack of ideas. You start off really strong in January, you have a notebook full of clever thoughts, and by February 12th, the well is completely dry. You sit down to post and you just stare at the screen.
And what's happening mechanically there is a failure of curation, not a failure of creativity.
Awesome.
Well, you are trying to invent a new concept, ex nihilo, every single day, out of thin air. And that drains your cognitive resources incredibly rapidly.
That makes a lot of sense. Then there's the lack of time, which is basically the entrepreneur's dilemma. You post beautifully and consistently during your slow season, but the moment you sign 3 new clients or, supply chain issues blow up, your social media presence just completely evaporates.
Which sends a terrible signal to the market. Your audience and the algorithm assumes you've either gone out of business or lost relevance. And ironically, that happens exactly at the moment when you are actually the most successful and busy.
The irony is incredibly painful. Okay, the third symptom is perfectionism, or what I like to call production complexity. You actually have the time and you have the ideas, but you spend 3 days tweaking the font on a graphic.
Oh, the font tweaking.
Or agonizing over a single adjective in a caption. You move so slowly that maintaining any kind of real frequency becomes mathematically impossible.
I see this constantly with highly technical B2B companies. They treat a LinkedIn post like it's a peer-reviewed academic journal submission.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I once spent 4 full days editing a 60-second video for a project. I added sound effects, custom B-roll, these incredible transitions. I was so proud of it.
I did too.
I posted it, it got 4 likes, and I was so demoralized, I didn't open the app again for a month. I was entirely a victim of my own production complexity.
That perfectly illustrates the danger. And closely related to that is a lack of positioning. You procrastinate sitting down to do the work because you haven't actually decided what your brand's unique angle is.
You're having an identity crisis every time you open a draft.
Exactly. Every time you try to write, you feel like you are reinventing the wheel. You're trying to figure out if you should sound corporate today, or funny, or highly technical. Because that decision matrix is just way too complex, your brain chooses the path of least resistance.
Which is doing nothing.
Right, doing nothing at all.
Then we have posting at random, the shotgun approach. One day you share a meme, the next day it's a dense 3-page white paper on macroeconomics, the next day it's a picture of your office dog.
It's totally chaotic.
And because it lacks focus, it doesn't build an audience. Who is that for?
Exactly. Which leads directly to the next symptom, low returns. You put in the effort, you post for a few weeks, and you get 2 likes. Because the returns are low, you just drift to a stop. But what the source text points out, which is vital to understand about algorithmic latency, is that early results are always noisy and lagged by weeks.
Wait, explain that. What do you mean by algorithmic latency? Why is it lagged?
Think about it from the machine's perspective. When you start posting, the platform's machine learning model doesn't know who you are, doesn't know who wants your content.
Sure.
So it has to test your content against a very small random sample of users.
Okay.
If those initial users don't engage, maybe because they were the wrong audience or maybe just by chance the algorithm suppresses the post, it takes weeks of consistent data feeding for the model to successfully map your content to the correct psychographic cluster of users.
So you have to be patient.
Right. Yeah. Quitting because of low early returns is like planting an acorn, digging it up 3 days later, and throwing it away because it isn't an oak tree yet.
That makes so much sense. You have to give the machine time to calibrate. And the final common symptom is waiting on others' approval. You draft a great post, but it has to go through your co-founder, then the legal team, and then the client for sign-off. The momentum just dies in a 15-email thread.
It's agonizing.
Sure.
So what the author introduces to solve all of this is a very clinical symptom-cause-fix framework. He emphasizes that two businesses might look identical from the outside, like they both haven't posted in a month, but they require entirely different fixes because their underlying causes are fundamentally different.
Let's ground this. Let's build a hypothetical business right now. Let's say we have a local, specialized, commercial HVAC company. They install massive air conditioning units for office buildings.
Okay, good example.
The owner comes to us and says, here's my symptom. I posted 3 times in early March, and then I went totally dark for the last 6 weeks.
Okay, so we apply the framework. We have to investigate the cause. Why did they go dark? We audit their workflow and realize the cause is that it takes the owner 2 full hours to create a single post.
2 hours.
Yeah, because they feel the need to invent a brand new, highly technical angle and design a custom infographic from scratch every single time.
Right. They're trying to explain thermodynamics in a Canva graphic every Tuesday.
Exactly. The bottleneck is the creative heavy lifting at the point of execution. So the fix isn't telling the HVAC owner to try harder to be creative or wake up earlier.
Because that just increases the water pressure on the broken pipe.
Right. The fix is a targeted system change. The fix is to define just 3 repeatable topics, say energy efficiency tips, common maintenance failures, and behind-the-scenes installation photos.
Keep it simple.
Then, create one standardized visual template for each and force a rough draft in 30 minutes. You bypass the bottleneck entirely.
So what does this all mean? It brings us to what I think is the most profound operational rule in the entire text. It's a concept borrowed straight from manufacturing and supply chain management, applied perfectly to content creation.
The theory of constraints.
Yes. The golden rule is this. You can only produce as much content as your slowest step. Let me say that again, because if you are taking notes, this is the one to underline. You can only produce as much content as your slowest step.
It is the absolute truth.
It doesn't matter how fast you can write a clever caption. If it takes you 4 days to get approval from legal, you are a 4-day operation.
It's pure physics. Think of a factory. If a factory can build 500 car engines a day, but they only have enough tires delivered to finish 50 cars a day, the factory's output is 50 cars.
Everything else is just bottlenecked.
Right. Everything else is just expensive inventory sitting on the floor. In social media, your inventory is half-written drafts. It's unedited videos and unapproved ideas. Let's deeply analyze these specific bottlenecks the text highlights.
Let's do it. First, bottleneck. What if your slowest step is context switching? This happens when a business is trying to be everywhere at once. Our HVAC guy is trying to post a technical article on LinkedIn, then switch gears to make a trending audio TikTok, then jump over to a Facebook community group.
The mental tax of switching platform languages like that is immense. Cognitive load theory tells us that every time you switch tasks, your brain has to load an entirely new set of rules into working memory. That takes energy and time.
So how do we fix it?
The fix for context switching is to ruthlessly cut down the number of platforms. The source explicitly states that when auditing a struggling account, the biggest leap in consistency usually comes from removing a platform, not adding one.
Wow. Okay, next bottleneck. Production complexity. We talked about this a bit with my 4-day video disaster. This is when you are insisting on mixing formats, like a highly edited video on Monday, a 10-slide carousel on Wednesday, a deeply researched long-form text post on Friday.
The friction of constantly changing your production tools, opening Premiere Pro, then switching to Figma, then switching to a text editor, it completely kills momentum.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
The fix is to stop mixing formats. If you are a great writer, write text posts. If you are great on camera, just talk to the lens. Master one single production pipeline before you even think about building a second one.
Got it. Then we have the bottleneck of approval and polishing. If your perfectionism is your slowest step.
The fix is all about shortening cycles. The text advocates for publishing version 1 and iterating in public. Social media is inherently ephemeral. Because of the velocity of the feed, that post you spent 4 days polishing is going to be buried in 4 hours anyway.
That is slightly depressing, but very true.
It is mathematically better to get a good enough version out there, let the algorithm test it, and learn from the actual audience reaction, rather than trying to guess in a vacuum for days.
And finally, what if decision-making is your slowest step? If you sit down and have to decide, who am I talking to today? What is my core message?
You are burning precious cognitive energy before you've written a single word. The fix for decision fatigue is to shrink your topical focus. Choose one clear promise, one specific audience, and a small set of recurring angles.
The overarching takeaway from this entire diagnostic phase is that your ultimate goal as the architect of your marketing system is to get the number of daily decisions down to 0.
0 decisions at the point of execution.
I love that framing. What are you going to say? That should already be decided. What does the visual look like? Already decided. How long is it going to take you to make it? Already decided. You are actively trying to make consistency boring.
Boring is good.
I know boring sounds like a bad word in marketing where everyone wants to be disruptive and cutting edge. But when it comes to back-end operations, you want boring. Boring is reliable. Boring runs on autopilot. And boring is what allows your effort to compound over time.
It is the shift from relying on the erratic, unpredictable energy of the artist to the predictable, scalable efficiency of the engineer. But that brings up the next logical question, right? And this transitions into our second major section.
Right.
Because if we have diagnosed the leaks and we've sealed the pipes by removing these bottlenecks, what kind of water are we actually pumping through this system?
Exactly. If I've stripped away the complexity, how do I actually fill the pipeline without starting from scratch every single day? How do I go from sudden flashes of brilliance to sustainable, predictable repeat?
The author hits on a mindset shift here that is essential for anyone feeling overwhelmed. He says, stop striving for brilliance. Start striving for repeat.
But wait, let me push back on that a little bit. If I'm just striving for repeat, doesn't that mean my content is going to be incredibly dry? If I'm not trying to be brilliant, why would anyone follow me?
It's a totally fair question, but it fundamentally misunderstands what the audience finds valuable. Brilliance in social media often translates to the creator trying to sound incredibly smart.
Right, using big words.
Using complex jargon or trying to invent a completely novel philosophical concept in every single post. The audience doesn't want you to reinvent the wheel. They usually just want a very clear, highly practical solution to a problem they are currently facing. Repeat doesn't mean saying the exact same words. It means repeatedly addressing the core needs of your customer.
Okay, that makes sense. It takes the pressure off. I don't have to be Hemingway every time I log into LinkedIn. I just need to be helpful.
Exactly. And the most effective way to build this repeatable, helpful pipeline is by pinning down 3 to 5 content pillars. But these aren't just, random topics you find interesting. The text gives us a phenomenal framework specifically for small businesses. It suggests that your content pillars should perfectly mirror the actual buying journey of your customer.
Let's break that buying journey down because it's brilliant. The source maps it to 5 distinct categories. First, the problems you solve. Second, how you solve them. Third, proof that your solution actually works. Fourth, a behind-the-scenes look at your process. And fifth, answering common objections.
We should do a gut check on that list because the author provides a great analytical filter here. If a piece of content doesn't help a potential customer decide, trust, or buy, it is likely just vanity content.
Vanity content.
Yeah. It might get a spike in likes, but it is not moving the needle for the business's bottom line.
So let's go back to our commercial HVAC company. If they post a hilarious meme about how tired everyone is on Mondays, sure, other local business owners might like it, they might chuckle. But does it help a property manager decide to hire them?
Not at all.
Does it answer an objection about their maintenance contract pricing? No, it's pure vanity.
But look at how powerful it is when we map those 5 pillars directly to the HVAC business. Pillar 1, problems you solve. That could be a post about why office buildings on the east side of town always have humidity issues in July.
Highly specific.
Pillar 2,
Yeah.
how you solve them. A breakdown of a specific dehumidification retrofit you do. Pillar 3, proof. A quote from a building manager whose energy bill dropped 20%. Pillar 4, behind the scenes. A photo of your team navigating a massive crane to put a unit on a roof.
That's visually interesting, too.
And Pillar 5, objections. A post explaining exactly why your quotes are 10% higher than the competitor but save money over 5 years.
That is a complete holistic marketing strategy that requires absolutely zero brilliance to generate. It just requires documenting reality.
And once you have those pillars established, the text advises making sure each one is narrow enough that you could brainstorm 10 specific angles for it without breaking a sweat. If a pillar is too broad, it triggers decision fatigue again.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The author suggests that you shouldn't think of yourself as writing individual posts at all. You should think of yourself as creating shows.
Applying the constraint of a series.
Yes. Setting up formulaic structures that your audience comes to anticipate. You become a broadcaster, not just a poster. Maybe every Tuesday you do a myth-busting post. Every Thursday is a case study breakdown.
Oh.
Every Friday is a checklist.
The brilliance of this is cognitive offloading. Once you establish the series structure of the show format, the only decision you have to make each week is which specific factual example to plug into the format.
The template does the heavy lifting.
You aren't staring at a blank page. You are just filling in the blanks of a template you already know works.
It's the difference between trying to invent a brand new gourmet recipe every single night for dinner versus just having Taco Tuesday. On Taco Tuesday, you don't have to think about what you are making or what pans you need or what the plating will look like.
You just execute.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You just open the fridge, see if you have chicken or beef, and you plug it into the taco system. The structure is already there. It gives you incredible speed.
That is a highly accurate analogy.
Oh.
And once you have that foundational structure, the next mechanism the text introduces is the recycling flywheel. This is how you amplify a single core thought into a massive amount of content without coming across as repetitive or spammy.
Walk us through this, because I think this is where a lot of people fundamentally misunderstand repurposing. They think repurposing just means copying and pasting a Twitter post, slapping it on a colorful background, and putting it on Instagram. But the author is talking about something much deeper, transmuting an anchor thought.
It is about changing the function of the content. You are changing the cognitive task it asks the reader to perform, not just the format. Let's use the exact example from the source text. Let's say you run a home service business. Your anchor thought for the week is, most quotes given in the home service industry are the wrong type of quote.
Okay, that's a strong, opinionated anchor thought. It has some friction to it. How do we build a flywheel out of that one sentence?
Instead of just posting that thought once and moving on, you segment it into different psychological angles across the week. Post number 1 could be a quick, punchy statement that just describes the error, pointing out that vague, one-line estimates hurt the homeowner because they hide hidden fees.
So the function of that post is purely problem awareness. You are waking the customer up to a danger.
Right. Then, post number 2 could be a simple, highly actionable checklist. 5 things that must be included in a valid home service quote. You've shifted from describing the problem to providing a tangible tool.
Same anchor thought, entirely different utility for the reader. Now we are in solution awareness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Post number 3 could be a narrative story. You share a real-life anecdote about a time you witnessed a homeowner get burned by a bad, vague quote from a competitor, and how your team had to come in, assess the damage, and fix it properly.
So now we have social proof, empathy, and narrative tension.
And finally, post number 4 could directly handle a common customer objection related to that exact topic.
Oh.
Like, why our detailed quotes take 24 hours to generate instead of the 20 minutes the other guys take.
That is masterful. You took one single idea quotes and you generated a problem awareness post, an actionable checklist, a narrative story, and an objection handling post. The key insight here, as the text explicitly states, is that you have to vary the task the post performs.
That's the secret.
That keeps the algorithm happy because you aren't just spamming duplicate text, and it keeps the audience engaged because you are lighting up different parts of their brain. The analytical part, the emotional part, the practical part.
The author notes that a healthy small business pipeline can easily take one anchor thought and transmute it into 4 to 8 distinct platform-specific pieces. That is how you scale your content output without linearly scaling your stress levels or your time investment.
But to execute that without losing your mind, we have to talk about the actual daily workflow.
Hmm.
Because having a great theory is fine, but how do we actually sit down at the keyboard and do this? The text emphasizes determining a minimum viable bar.
This goes back to combating perfectionism. What is the absolute minimum requirement for a post to be considered good enough to publish and provide value? The author suggests a ruthlessly simple standard.
I love this part.
One key insight, one concrete example, one actionable takeaway. If a draft hits those 3 marks, it clears the bar. You publish it, you eliminate all the extra fluff.
Keep the block small. And to hit that bar consistently, the text says you have to decouple thinking from making.
This is a critical distinction in cognitive labor. Generating ideas. The strategic thinking part requires a completely different brain state than formatting text, finding emojis, or scheduling posts in a calendar.
Definitely.
The text recommends batching the hardest part, the idea generation and curation of those anchor thoughts, into a single, deeply focused 45-minute session at the very beginning of the week.
You sit down with your coffee on Monday morning and you just brainstorm the anchors and the angles. You don't write the actual posts, you just build the skeleton. Then you can come back later in the week in shorter 15-minute bursts when your brain is fresh for execution and actually flesh out the drafts.
And this is where the author brings in the strategic use of AI and specific tools like Whoop Social. We are at a point, technologically, where you can use these systems to completely remove the friction of the blank page.
Okay, I want to drill into this because AI in marketing is a minefield right now. Everyone can spot a ChatGPT post from a mile away. It sounds like a robot wearing a suit. How does a tool like Whoop Social actually work under the hood so it doesn't sound like generic garbage?
It comes down to context windows and parameter grounding. When you just tell a generic AI, write a post about HVAC, it pulls from the statistical average of the entire internet, which results in that bland, robotic tone you mentioned. It lacks specific constraints.
Right.
But a specialized system like Whoop Social operates differently. The text describes a workflow where you essentially feed the tool the precise data from your business website, your specific services, your specific geographic area, your actual customer testimonials.
So you are narrowing the context window. You are telling the AI only use these specific building blocks to construct the draft.
Exactly. The automation handles the structural drafting phase based on your established pillars and website data. In minutes, it can generate a month's worth of first drafts that are factually aligned with your business. But, and this is the crucial human element, the text stresses the AI does not handle the final voice fail.
Right. You don't just hit auto-publish.
Never. The system generates the starting points. It solves the blank page problem. Then, you use your human energy, your unique, lived expertise to go in and inject the life. You add a concrete example from a job site you visited yesterday. You strengthen the hook with a bold opinion only an industry veteran would have. You tweak the language so it sounds authentically like you.
You're basically hiring a highly efficient intern to write all the rough drafts, compile the research, and format the structure so you can step in as the high-level editor-in-chief. You only spend your time on the highest leverage activity, injecting your unique point of view. That speeds up the version 1 phase exponentially.
Which is the perfect segue into our third major section. Because once you have this beautifully efficient pipeline pumping out drafts, the biggest trap a business can fall into is taking that content and treating every single social media platform like they are identical ecosystems.
The myth of platform equality. This is where so many otherwise good systems break down. We just assume that a smart piece of text is going to perform equally well everywhere. We treat the internet like one giant billboard.
But the platforms are fundamentally different beasts, engineered with entirely different algorithmic architectures, user interface behaviors, and definitions of what consistency actually means to them. The source text does an excellent job of dissecting what the major platforms actually value right now underneath the surface.
Let's break those down because this dictates our entire distribution strategy. Let's start with LinkedIn. What does the LinkedIn algorithm actually want from us, from an engineering perspective?
According to the text, LinkedIn is built on a professional social graph. It values weekly consistency, but it heavily prioritizes strong, POV-driven content over pure volume.
Point of view.
Yes. Because it's a professional network, the algorithm is looking for signals of authority and depth comments that are paragraphs long, shares by other industry leaders. They want professional insights, a clear point of view, and depth of experience. You absolutely do not need to post 5 times a day there.
It's like a massive, global, high-end networking event. You don't want to be the person running around the room frantically shoving business cards in everyone's face every 5 seconds. People will avoid you.
It's annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to be the person who stands by the coffee machine and calmly drops one incredibly profound, deeply researched insight that makes everyone in the circle stop, listen, and start a discussion.
That's a great way to visualize the cadence LinkedIn rewards. Showing up reliably once or twice a week with a deeply thoughtful industry perspective is rewarded far more than spamming the feed with shallow links. Now, contrast that architecture with Instagram and TikTok.
Completely different universe.
Entirely. The text states that Instagram and TikTok value content shape consistency.
Content shape. I've heard that phrase tossed around, but what does it actually mean in practice? How does an algorithm detect shape?
Think about it from the perspective of user behavior on a vertical video feed. Users are swiping at light speed. They are making split-second decisions about whether to stay or swipe. The algorithm and the audience's brain relies on rapid pattern recognition.
Okay.
Content shape means the structural, visual, and auditory format of your content is instantly recognizable.
So if I'm a real estate agent and my successful videos are always me walking on a treadmill, pointing to text bubbles while fast-paced music plays, that is my shape.
Exactly. If you suddenly post a moody, slow-motion video with a quiet voiceover of a house tour, you break the pattern. The audience doesn't instantly recognize the value proposition, so they swipe. The algorithm sees the swipe, assumes your content is no longer engaging your core audience, and throttles your reach.
Wow.
Instagram and TikTok want you to find a shape that works for your niche, and then ruthlessly repeat that shape so the algorithm knows exactly who to serve it to.
They are looking for visual predictability. That makes so much sense. Now, let's look at X, or Twitter. The author points out that X values something entirely different: session consistency.
Yes, X operates as a real-time, chronological heavy fire hose of information. The text argues that spending a dedicated 15-minute burst engaging in replies, joining trending conversations, and firing off a few short-form posts in one sitting will typically perform better than scheduling one brilliant standalone post to drop every 3 days.
Why is that? What is the mechanism there?
It has to do with how X monetizes and serves ad loads. They need users to stay on the platform in active sessions. If you are actively replying and creating a web of engagement in real time, the algorithm boosts your visibility to keep that node of activity alive. It's a real-time conversation.
It's a loud, crowded cocktail party. If you walk into that party, shout one brilliant sentence into the center of the room, and immediately turn around and leave the building, people are just going to think you're weird.
Yeah, they'll ignore you.
You have to stick around, mingle, reply to people's jokes, and be part of the flow of the room.
Exactly. So understanding these drastically different algorithmic realities forces you, as the business owner, to ask a very pragmatic question. How do you choose where to actually focus your limited time? Because if you try to do the deep, slow-burn POV on LinkedIn, AD maintain the strict visual shape on TikTok, AD do the rapid-fire 15-minute burst sessions on X, you are right back to massive context switching and your system will inevitably collapse.
Which is why the author insists you must define a home platform. And the rule for choosing this home platform is completely ruthless, and I love it. Your home platform is wherever you can consistently deliver a version 1 post in under 30 minutes.
30 minutes is the hard metric.
If it takes you 2 hours to film, light, and edit a TikTok, TikTok cannot be your home platform. It's mathematically unsustainable for you.
Right, because your home platform has to be the one that survives your worst, most chaotic, busiest client week. When everything is on fire, your server's down, your kids are sick, where can you still manage to show up in under 30 minutes? You protect your consistency there at all costs.
That is your anchor.
Then and only then do you attempt to keep 1 or 2 secondary platforms live through recycling your anchor thoughts.
For example, the author mentions his own workflow. He chooses LinkedIn as his home platform because he is a writer. He can articulate a deep POV quickly in text. Then he takes that core idea, strips it down, and recycles it into a script for a short X thread, without having to recreate the entire conceptual message from scratch.
It is about budgeting your time like an entrepreneur, not an artist. An artist waits for the muse, ignores the clock, and spends unlimited resources crafting a masterpiece. An entrepreneur looks at the clock, looks at the spreadsheet, and asks, what is the maximum output and ROI I can achieve with this specific, finite allocation of resources?
To help with that precise budgeting, the text breaks down these brilliant cadence tiers. It scales your system based on your actual realistic bandwidth. Let's walk the listener through these so they can figure out exactly where their business belongs right now.
The first tier is lean. This is for when you truly only have about 60 minutes a week total to dedicate to social media marketing.
60 minutes a week, that is highly relatable for most founders who are also doing sales and product development. But what can you actually achieve of value in just 1 hour?
With a lockdown template and an AI drafting assist, that 60-minute supports one meaty core post on your home platform, two quick recycled spin-off posts on your secondary platforms, and one or two 10-minute bursts of active engagement commenting on clients' posts or replying to industry news. That is the baseline required to stay top of mind without going deep.
Okay, so that's the lean tier. What if I can carve out a bit more time? Let's say I have a virtual assistant helping me. What is the standard tier?
The standard tier assumes you have 2 to 3 hours a week. At this level, you can introduce a standing series post, like a weekly case study of the week or an industry news breakdown. With 2 to 3 hours, you can produce a core concept, generate 4 to 6 native platform formats, and get them all scheduled out so you aren't relying on daily motivation at all.
You are building a real operational engine at that point. And then there is the aggressive tier.
The aggressive tier requires 5 or more hours a week. This isn't just about posting more often. It's about shifting the type of media. You are introducing higher production formats. You are adding video. You are adding deeper storytelling carousels, and you are spending significantly more time actively cultivating the community in the comments section.
But the absolute key here, and the author stresses this heavily, is that you can consciously shift between these tiers based on the seasonality of your business.
It's a throttle, not an on-off switch.
Exactly. If it's Q4 and you are an e-commerce brand getting slammed with holiday orders, you intentionally downshift to the lean tier. If it's July and things are slow, you upshift to the aggressive tier to build audience. And you don't feel guilty about downshifting because it is a planned system adjustment, not a failure of willpower.
Speaking of taking the pressure off, there was a fascinating data point dropped in the text regarding audience reality that I think we need to highlight because it changes how we view our posting schedule.
Yes, the Pew Research data. This blew my mind.
The text cites the Pew Teen Social Media and Tech Study to track the trend. In 2023, it showed that about half of teens were on Snapchat and Instagram daily. But the 2024 update shows that a staggering 96% of teens use the internet daily. Now, if we connect this to the bigger picture, why does a statistic about teenagers matter for a B2B software founder or a local plumber who isn't targeting teens at all?
It matters because it illustrates the macro trend of human behavior. It proves that the audience is always there. The internet is no longer a destination you log on to at 6 p.m. after dinner. It is a river that is constantly flowing all around us all the time. People are checking their phones in line at the grocery store, between meetings, on the train.
Precisely. You don't have to stress endlessly about missing the one magic algorithm window of the best time to post because your audience is practically living online. The goal isn't to time the market perfectly. The goal is to establish a sustainable rhythm so that whenever they do happen to look up and check their feed, you are predictably present.
It shifts the entire focus from when is the optimal hour to post on Tuesday to what is the structural cadence I can sustain for the next 2 years? Because sustainable rhythm is what actually builds top-of-mind awareness over the long haul.
Which perfectly sets up our final and arguably most important section, redefining success through metrics. We've diagnosed the bottlenecks, we've built the system, we are pumping transmuted content through the pipeline, we are managing our cadence tiers. But how do we actually know if it's working? It's time to look at the dashboard.
And this is where we have to have a very honest, perhaps slightly uncomfortable conversation about what we are actually measuring on a daily basis.
Because human psychology naturally gravitates toward the shiniest number.
I will be the first to confess, like 99% of people, my default behavior is to post something, wait 10 minutes, and obsessively check the likes. I refresh the page. If it gets a lot of likes and reach, I get a dopamine hit. I feel like a genius. I tell myself it was a good post. If it gets crickets, I feel terrible. I question my entire industry expertise, and I immediately want to tear down and change my entire strategy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that reactive, emotionally driven behavior is exactly what destroys long-term consistency. The author makes a profound point here. Performance metrics, likes, shares, reach, impressions, are incredibly noisy on a week-to-week basis. They're influenced by 1,000 external variables that you have absolutely zero control over.
Like what? What kind of variables?
Well, the platform's algorithm might be running an A/B test that day that suppresses external links. A massive global news event might dominate the feed, distracting everyone. The time of day, a server outage, or even just a slight shift in user interface design can tank your reach for a week.
It's like checking your retirement portfolio every 5 minutes and panic selling every time it dips by a fraction of a percent because someone sneezed on Wall Street.
Yeah.
You're reacting to noise, not signal.
Exactly. If you let week-to-week performance metrics dictate your mental health and your operational strategy, they will fool you into tweaking your content prematurely, long before real, statistically significant patterns have time to develop. You end up chasing viral anomalies trying to recreate that one post that got 1,000 likes instead of building a compounding foundation of trust.
So, if we aren't supposed to obsess over likes and reach, what are we supposed to look at? How do I know if my system is healthy? The text gives us a masterclass on this. It outlines what it calls the big three consistency metrics. These are the internal operational metrics that actually predict whether you will still be in the game a month from now.
Let's walk through these because this is the dashboard every single business owner should be looking at first, before they even glance at engagement. Metric number 1, cadence adherence rate.
Sounds very clinical. How is that calculated?
It is simple, brutal math. It is the number of posts you actually published divided by the number of posts you plan to publish in your system.
Okay, so if my system, let's say I'm on the standard tier, dictates that I plan to post 12 times this month across all my platforms, and I only got 9 of them out, my cadence adherence rate is 75%.
Precisely. And the author sets a very clear operational benchmark here. Anything below 80% is generally a systems problem, not a discipline problem.
I love that framing. It removes the guilt. If you are hitting 75%, don't beat yourself up for being lazy. Look at the system. Why did those 3 posts fail to launch? Was the approval process too slow? Did you run out of ideas? Did you try a new video format that took too long? Find the bottleneck and fix the system.
Metric number 2 is critical for entrepreneurial peace of mind. Content buffer depth. This measures how many days or weeks worth of content you have completely finished, approved, and waiting in the wings to be published.
This is the shock absorber for your business. I want to spend some time here because I think people underestimate how fast things go wrong in a small business. The text gives us exact parameters for this buffer. If your buffer is 7 days, that is considered fragile.
Think of a 7-day buffer like a restaurant that buys its ingredients every single morning. If one delivery truck breaks down or the chef gets a flat tire, you have no menu that night. You are operating on the edge of failure. One bad flu, and your marketing system is behind.
A 14-day buffer is considered stable. You have some breathing room. And a 21-day or larger buffer is considered robust. That is having a deep freezer full of inventory. That is what you want heading into the holidays, big sales pushes, or when you know you have a crazy client delivery season coming up.
If your buffer depth falls to 0, meaning you are waking up on a Tuesday and having to write the post that goes out that same Tuesday afternoon, all it takes is one unexpected phone call from an angry client to completely snap your streak.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. If I write a post 2 or 3 weeks in advance to build a 21-day buffer, isn't it going to be completely irrelevant by the time it goes live? Social media moves in minutes, trends die in days. How do you buffer without sounding totally out of touch?
That is the crucial difference between relying on trending content versus building evergreen architecture. If your entire strategy relies on lip syncing to the viral audio of the day or commenting on breaking news, then yes, you cannot build a buffer. But remember the pillars we established. Problems you solve, how you solve them, customer proof, handling objections. The reasons a property manager needs a new HVAC system do not change based on what is trending on TikTok. The fundamentals of your business are evergreen.
Right.
Your buffer should be built almost entirely on those evergreen foundational pillars. You can always pause the queue to drop in a timely post if you want to, but the evergreen buffer ensures the machine never stops running.
That distinction is vital. Buffer the evergreen, sprinkle the timely. Okay, which leads directly to the third metric, production lead time. This measures how long it takes, on average, from the moment you start creating a post to the moment it is actually scheduled or published.
If your lead time is a week because of endless revisions, you are never going to be able to build that 14-day buffer. You will always be underwater. You need to drive that lead time down using the standardized templates in the version 1 mindset we discussed earlier.
So we have our dashboard. Cadence adherence, buffer depth, lead time. The author provides a simple golden rule for how to actually use this dashboard to make decisions, he says. When a metric falls, don't adjust the goal, adjust the process.
Let's apply that practically. Say you were looking at your dashboard at the end of the month and you are missing your pace. Your cadence adherence rate has dropped to 60%. What process do you adjust?
If you are missing your pace, the text says you need to simplify the format. Pivot away from whatever complex, custom thing you're trying to make and fall back on a standing series. Stop trying to write an original essay and just swap out the example in a template. Lower the difficulty setting until your adherence rate gets back above 80%.
Exactly. Now, what if your adherence is fine, but your buffer is getting dangerously thin? You are down to a 3-day buffer. What is the process adjustment?
If the buffer is thin, you need to radically adjust your batching process. Batch the topics and hooks, and then look for leverage in the execution. This is the exact moment where you might lean heavily on an AI tool like Whoop Social to instantly generate a month of structural drafts, just so you have raw material to work with, and you can rebuild that 14-day cushion fast. You trade a little bit of custom polish for the safety of depth.
And finally, what if your lead time is too long? What if you are constantly scrambling same day because every post takes 3 hours to finish?
Then the building blocks you are trying to use are too large. You are trying to build cathedrals every day instead of just laying individual bricks. You need to make the blocks smaller. Break down a massive idea into 4 tiny, punchy posts. Turn a 5-minute video script into a simple text checklist. Reduce the scope of the task.
The overarching rhythm the text suggests for managing all of this without letting it consume your life is a structured monthly review routine.
1 hour, once a month? No fuss. That is the maintenance schedule.
During that hour, you look at your 3 consistency metrics first to make sure the machine is fundamentally running. Are we adhering? Is the buffer deep? Is the lead time short? Only after you confirm the system is healthy do you look at the performance metrics, the likes and the reach, to see where you can optimize the messaging. You identify the specific formats that allowed you to stay consistent with a low lead time and that also got good engagement. Those are your compounding engines. You push those hard next month.
And just as importantly, you have to be absolutely brutal during this review. You have to kill anything that is regularly taking too long or making you miss your targets. And here's the hard part. Even if that highly edited video series gets great engagement, if it takes you 10 hours to make and causes you to miss 3 other posts, it is a bad system component. It will fail the second your business gets busy. You have to kill it.
It requires an immense amount of operational discipline to kill a format that performs well publicly but operates poorly internally. But it is the only way to ensure long-term survival. You take the formats that did work easily and you convert them into next month's pipeline as templates.
Rinse and repeat. And suddenly, as the author says, your consistency stops being a personality quirk or a reflection of your mood, and it becomes a measurable, scalable, competitive differentiator in your market. While your competitors are posting in frantic bursts and going dark for months, you are just a steady drumbeat of value.
So if we synthesize all of this, the diagnosis of the bottlenecks, the architecture of the pipeline, the platform tiers, and the operational dashboard, what is the ultimate takeaway for the listener today?
The ultimate takeaway is that if you are that person sitting at your desk on a Thursday afternoon, staring at a blinking cursor and feeling guilty about not posting, you need to let yourself off the hook emotionally and put yourself on the hook systematically. Consistency on social media has absolutely nothing to do with your willpower. It has nothing to do with hustle.
Right.
It is simply having a clear diagnosis of your production bottlenecks, a structured pipeline of evergreen pillars, a realistic cadence tier that matches your actual bandwidth, and a dashboard that measures system health instead of vanity metrics. The goal isn't to become a full-time content creator. You have a business to run. The goal is to build an engine that runs quietly and predictably in the background while you are busy actually scaling that business.
It is a phenomenal reframing of the work. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder, building on something we discussed in that metrics section. The author talked about treating your content buffer with the utmost priority. If we take that literally, if we are supposed to treat our 14-day content buffer with the exact same protective mindset, the exact same urgency that a business owner uses to protect their cash flow, how would that fundamentally change the way you value your marketing?
Oh, wow. Because if you run out of cash flow, the business dies. It's existential.
Exactly. If you treat your buffer like cash flow, you stop gambling it away. You stop valuing the lottery ticket of trying to go viral with one crazy off-brand post, and you start desperately valuing boring, predictable consistency. Imagine what would happen if you completely stopped trying to be universally loved by the algorithm forever, and instead focused entirely on being predictably, reliably present for the specific few people whose trust you actually need to earn.
That is a massive paradigm shift. earning trust through predictability instead of begging for attention through virality. I love that. And that brings us to the end of our journey today. If you are that person staring at the blinking cursor right now, close the blank document, open up your calendar, map out your 3 pillars, and start building your 14-day buffer. Build the system, not the streak. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of social media. We will see you next time.